Hi everybody, it's Carol. It's week 6 and we are supposed to create a course that has an active learning module using one of the active learning tools that we have tried this particular class. And so I decided that I was bored with my literature, responding to literature through composition, which is what I actually did my text post about. And so I created a whole new course, and it is something that I've been thinking about for a while. I decided that I wanted to do a course that was called Survey of Southern Literature. And I did some research, just really basic research. Like I went to Wikipedia to see if I had enough base knowledge to do that. And I figured that was probably the basis knowledge that you could get Wikipedia. And I just wanted a kind of an outline of periods of Southern literature to see if I sort of had that in mind, and I did. But they kind of gave names to it, and so that helped me as far as just sort of defining those different periods of Southern literature. For instance, an antebellum period before the Civil War. The book that I particularly wanted to use for my module was The Invention of Wings by Sue Monk Kidd, which was during that antebellum period. So that worked out actually. But then I also knew that there were lots of other types of Southern literature that I have enjoyed and have read critically over the years and wanted to see how they sort of fit in. And so I read several articles, some through the Baker Library, some online. And I don't know, I was a little bit worried about Dr. Langhorst's example because he had these lectures that had the PowerPoints that he had created, and I didn't know that we were supposed to do that necessarily. So I hope that Dr. Langhorst will speak to that. I did find a couple of things to add to my module as far as introducing the module to the students. But anyway, and I'll talk about that in a second. But anyway, I didn't create any PowerPoints or anything. I said I would use PowerPoints and that I would use a screencast. And so anyway, so what I did was I looked at the different periods of literature, Southern literature, and also the genres of Southern literature because there are several different types. There is the slavery literature, for instance, and there is the abolitionist literature, and then there's the romanticized Southern literature that, that you think of Gone with the Wind, that period of time that romanticizes the Southern way of life that was. And so anyway, I wanted to kind of get all of that sort of sorted out in my mind before I started having a point of view. And so anyway, for my module, I decided that I would have students read 3 different works and compare those, that they would use one fictionalized work, which would be the novel that I mentioned, which would be The Invention of Wings by Sue Monk Kidd. And that book is set in the early 1800s, from 1800 to about 1839 or 1840. And it's about 2 historical figures, Sarah and Nina Grimke, who were daughters of a plantation owner, and they actually became abolitionists and moved north, left their childhood home in order to become abolitionists. They were disowned by their families. It was really a very bold move on their part to do that, particularly at that period in history. And then I wanted students to also read some of the works of Frederick Douglass, and also from a book called Incidents of My Life as a Slave Girl, or Incidents in the Life of a Slave Girl by Harriet Jacobs. And Harriet Jacobs is a pseudonym. The girl in the story, or the woman in the story, her name is Linda. And both of those are accounts that are written by people who had been slaves and what they had to say about their life as a slave. And so the idea was that they would take these autobiographical accounts and compare them to the fictionalized accounts and then see how that sort of fell out. So what would I use as an active learning tool? I would use a blog. And the reason I would use a blog is because there will be discussion forums, and there will also be papers that they will have to do. And I like the idea of the more informal writing that they will do. And so, as I had mentioned in my text post, I think that what I would have them do is I would have them do two particular um, blog posts. They would have to do two. One would be a personal blog post, and from the personal blog post, they could choose to do either a creative writing, like to write a story in the style of the author, Sue Monk Kidd. They could create another chapter for the book, for instance, just a short, approximately 750 words, just 2 or 3 pages. Or they could choose a topic from the lecture, something either about one of the Grimke sisters, just an episode in their life, or something that they read, another character, historical figure in the novel, or something about the abolitionist movement, or any number of things. Or they could choose something that maybe was an allusion to another historical event, or a biblical like the spirituals that the slaves sang in the novel, that kind of thing. They could use that and do just a small amount of research, one source. They would have to use MLA citation so that they would be doing that correctly. And then the final thing that they could do is they could analyze a part of the novel. They could say critically, does this have some merit? Is this well written? Was there something about this that showed some depth? Was there irony in it? Was there symbolism, something that shows that she was doing more than just slapping out a story? And so anyway, also MLA citation would be needed for that. So that particular active learning tool would be one that would be offered for 10 of the 13 weeks in the course. And they would have to do that 8 of the 10 weeks. And so they might choose to do it this particular module, or they might not. The second blog that they would have to choose from, there would be 2 topics that they could choose from. They could either choose from the incidents in the life of the slave girl by Harriet Jacobs. They could take chapter 2 talks about the girl in that story, Linda, going to a new master's house, and the same incident happens in the invention of wings. And so I want them to compare the feelings of the real person to the fictional character Handful in Kidd's story. I want them to see, did she get it right? Does she have some of the same feelings? Are they true? Did it seem like it was realistic based on what she read in Harriet Jacobs' account? The other incident is that in that very same chapter from Incidents in the Life of a Slave Girl, the woman of the house is very harsh with the slaves and the food that they eat. And that same incident is also happening in the Grimke household. And so that would be another thing that they could compare and contrast. And so that would be a more factual post, but they could write prose or they could write poetry if they want. They don't have to be, doesn't have to be a real English type paper. It could actually be something that could be an emotional response. It's supposed to have something that really makes them think and feel for the characters. All right, then the other thing that they could do was that Frederick Douglass spoke about Christianity and the Christianity that he saw in the South that had to do with slavery. And this was also representative in Kidd's book. And there was a poem, and it was a parody about religion. And so I pasted that in my module. And so I asked the students to also, again, write prose or write a poetic response to this. In addition to doing one or two of those things, they could do one or the other of those. I asked them also to add images or a video or a meme, something that gets them outside the box. Don't just be writing something. Don't just be creating poetry, but look out there on the internet. See if you see something out there that speaks to what's going on thematically in one of these 2 questions and post that also. So those were my ideas that I felt like would help them to think more critically about what they're reading, not just responding to discussion posts. And I'm not going to go through the grading. You'll see that on my sample thing. And I'll be anxious to hear what you have to say. And if you have any ideas or thoughts. So thanks for listening. Sorry it's so long.